As Canadians, we are warm, welcoming people. We welcome new people, new ideas, and new cultures into our country. As a Canadian, I take pride in keeping our community safe from my family, friends, and neighbors. I take pride in our criminal justice system to protect us and our communities from dangerous people in society. Our prison system was created so that these people, offenders, have a chance to reform and rejoin society as better individuals. But if our prison system is so great, why are recidivism rates so high? Why is the number one cause of death in prison suicide? Are prisoners receiving the help they need? To answer all these questions, I came up with the inquiry question, what elements of the Canadian prison system are affecting inmates' mental health? From the research I have done, I've concluded that the three biggest aspects of our prison system that could damage an inmate's mental health are solitary confinement, poor access to mental health care, and prison violence. Solitary confinement is a practice that has existed for a very long time and is still used in prisons today. Even though it may be used as a way to manage or isolate violent prisoners, there is extensive amounts of research indicating that it is harmful and has long-lasting negative effects on the people being held. Some of the syndromes associated with solitary confinement include hyperresponsivity to external stimuli, perceptual distortions, illusions, hallucinations, panic attacks, difficulty with thinking, concentration, and memory, intrusive obsessional thoughts, overt paranoia, and problems with impulse control. At least 20% of prisoners commit suicide every year, most of whom were in solitary confinement. Those who do survive are psychologically damaged beyond fixing. A study comparing men in provincial custody in Edmonton, Alberta, and men in the community resulted that 91.7% of men in prison suffer from mental health disorders, while only 43.7% in the community. This includes substance use disorders, antisocial disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, cognitive impairment, mood disorders, and many more. Another study done in BC shows that 80% of teenagers in youth detention centers suffer from mental health disorders. If the number of people who suffer from mental health disorders is so high, you'd expect good mental health care, right? But in reality, access to mental health care is very poor in prisons. The government spends over $200 million on healthcare a year, yet the number one complaint from inmates is that they aren't receiving quality mental health care. Not receiving proper mental health care will result in an individual lashing out and coping using unhealthy techniques. Canadian prisons are filled with gangs, many of which perpetrate violence and are involved in the prison drug trade. This forces inmates who are not in a gang to join a gang for protection. If not, they will most likely get killed. Nearly 5.6% of deaths in prison every year are gang-related homicides. Inmates have to live with the fear of being brutally murdered. This unsafe atmosphere itself affects one's mental health. A lack of trust in others creates a sense of loneliness, and in a place like prison, it will lead to self-harm and high amounts of drug use. In conclusion, as mentioned in the beginning, these are only the three biggest aspects of the Canadian prison system that I concluded from my research affects inmate mental health the most. Our prison system is unfortunately not as great as we say it is. So what can be done to change this? Firstly, solitary confinement can be removed. It is an outdated practice and it does not help inmates get better. In fact, solitary confinement violates many of the sections in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Secondly, more funding can be put towards mental health care. Since federal offenders are not covered in the Canada Health Act, it is the responsibility of Corrections Service Canada to provide routine checkups for these inmates. Like mentioned before, over $200 million a year is put towards healthcare. Out of the 70% that's put towards physical health care, if a portion of that is added to the mental health care budget, it can make a difference in helping federal offenders as well as other inmates. These issues are not ones commonly spoken about by our government. We as citizens and future voters of this country can make a difference by speaking out on these matters. Things will not change unless we ask them to be. So speak out and help make a difference in our society. Thank you.